It's the week 4 edition of the Phil Steele Show. Kyle Schassburger, Tripp Hurd, and Phil Steele are back with you off a record viewership week. We appreciate all of you who are watching on YouTube on the Varsity Network channel. We encourage you to continue to do that. Like, subscribe, push notifications. It's all available from Learfield, the Varsity Network channel on YouTube. Of course, you can be listening on the College Sports Now feed for the OG audio heads as well. We appreciate Phil being with us so much again ahead of a monster week. We've got a bunch of ranked on ranked showdowns. There's 4 of them headlined by Tennessee and Oklahoma. And Phil's coming off a week where he provided a Blitz cameo as well. Phil, are we going to see you again on the Blitz this weekend? Is that in the plans? Because we should promote such a thing. I had no idea a week ago.
Yeah, it was fun doing that. And, on the Blitz, it was listening to the radio broadcast, which is ahead of the TV broadcast, was pretty interesting as well. I'll let you know. We'll see how the weekend goes. Not for sure doing it, but always check it out.
Yeah, well, follow Phil Steele on Twitter at PhilSteele042 for all of that on X, at Locks of the Dock for Tripp, at Kyle Schass. Tripp, I survived Houston. The Bears didn't get the W. The fact that we're down by 6 with the ball in mid of 45 to play is remarkable. The defense is elite. Caleb Williams is going to get killed. You didn't even check on me to see if the Texans fans had engulfed your boy. You don't care about me.
It was a miracle that they were still in that game. I was keeping up with you on all your social media stuff, kind of living through you there for your trip to Houston. That had to be pretty cool.
Thank you. It was. Why don't you take us to the first game on Thursday night, my man?
Yeah, let's talk some games. We'll kick it off Thursday night, South Alabama at App State. 7:30 kick in Kid Brewer Stadium. App's coming off a 21-19 win at ECU last week. They've won the last 4 in this series with South Alabama. However, they haven't played since 2021. South Alabama really struggling on defense, 124th in passing success rate. I think Aguilar has a big night here. They only scored 21 last week, but they did put up over 500 yards of offense, over 6 yards per play against what was a pretty stout ECU defense. South Alabama, on the other hand, they're averaging 48 points per game, maybe padded stats a little bit with last week's game against Northwestern State, but I definitely think the over's in play here, Phil. What's your take on this one?
Yeah, that's probably the best play here. I had App State winning by about a touchdown. That's about where the spread is. But as you mentioned, App's been moving the football, just didn't score a lot of points. And East Carolina moved the football last week. They missed a field goal, missed a crucial extra point during that game, which cost East Carolina the cover. But and South Alabama is a team that, Gio Lopez missed the Ohio game when they only put 20 points on the board. Lopez returned to the lineup last week. Northwestern State's not a good team, so don't overreact to the 87 points they put on the board. But I think over does look like the best play here. Excellent analysis there, Tripp.
Yeah, what they do, like 6-minute quarters, 8-minute quarters or something in that game for USA against Northwestern State. It got out of hand in a hurry, a team that only played 6 games last week. So it'll be fun. The Sun Belt, I know our fearless leader, Adam Witten, is preparing on the mountain for that one. You can catch it on the Varsity Network. Download the Varsity Network app. You can listen to the Blitz. We talked about Phil's appearance last week. All these college football radio broadcast out-of-market games are available on the Varsity Network. All right, Phil, let's go to Friday. Stanford at Syracuse. The Orange are laying 9, 57.5 is the total, 7:30 on ESPN. First meeting, first time the Orange are hosting a team from California since 1968. If you remember from a couple weeks back, that's the year what? The hot tub was invented. Cardinal traveling roughly 2,100 miles for the first ACC roadie. They got Clemson next week. Both off open weeks. Q's 3-9 straight up. ATS off a regular season bye since 2009. Orange have won 7 of 11 Friday night games. Remember the big win over Clemson a handful of years back. I think it was 2017. Cal McCord, Phil, I'm loving what he's been cooking up. Now, I was high on Stanford coming in, but I don't know if the Cardinal can contain what McCord has done. First Fran Brown sellout, too, at the Dome. McCord leads the nation in TD passes per game with 4 scores, second in passing yards and total offense.
Yeah, Kyle McCord's looked really good so far. 8-1 ratio. LaQuint Allen can run the football, and they've got the receiving core. I think having Gadsden back has been a big thing for the offense for Syracuse. Remember, he missed all of last year. Now, they've only had 2 games, but they did lead Georgia Tech by 17 points in the fourth quarter for allowing a couple of late scores. And Stanford finally got that big win over Cal Poly, but I thought they gave TCU a good game in the opening game, but they were outgained by 176 yards. I just think Syracuse is the better team. The line's lower than I thought it would be. I thought it'd be closer to 2 touchdowns here. So I'm going to take Syracuse minus the points in this one.
Oh, I love it. That's beautiful. I'm putting a star by that one. Illinois and Nebraska. Top 25 showdown also on Friday. Number 24, Illini, taking on the 22nd ranked Nebraska Cornhuskers. That game is kicking off at 8 o'clock on Fox. Illini have won 3 of 4 against the Huskers, Phil. 3-1 ATS. Nebraska won 20-7 in Champaign last season, holding Illinois to just 21 yards on 19 rushing attempts. Got that right out of your magazine. Again, the Phil Steele College Football Preview Magazine, still plenty of time. We're not even a full third of the way. We're about at a third of the way through the regular season, but head to Books A Million, Barnes & Nobles, go online, philsteele.com for more info. Phil, Cornhuskers are completing a 4-game homestand. This is big, and it's rare that we see each of these two teams with numbers next to their name. I talk about contenders and pretenders. This is one of those main weekends, I think, that can help us differentiate and separate some of these teams at this stage in the season to see who's for real.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kyle. And this game might just do that. Both teams made me happy 2 weeks ago. Illinois by upsetting Kansas and Nebraska by blasting Colorado. So they both look really good. Last week, Illinois sort of got a fortunate cover against Central Michigan. They were only up by 7 at the half, only leading by 14 late in the game. And then Central goes in onside kicks after being stopped at first to goal at the 7. Illinois gets a short touchdown and wins that thing by 21. But overall, I think Nebraska is the better team. They're at home. Both teams have decent quarterbacks. So Altmaier last year was a sort of an iffy quarterback. This year he's got a 6-0 ratio. They've got Keaton Fagan at running back. And then you look at Nebraska, they've got a plethora of running backs. And Dylan Raiola has been the true deal. But I think Nebraska's got the better defense at home at night with the crowd there. I don't have this one as one of my top plays of the week. I only had Nebraska by 10. But with the line at 7.5, I'll go with Nebraska in this one.
400th consecutive sellout for Nebraska. First big opener at home for Nebraska, too, since 2017. Illini ranked for the first time since 22, where they rose to number 14. And earliest they've been ranked since the 08 preseason, when they were 3-0, or that was in the preseason. And then they went 3-0 for the first time since 2011. This is the first time since then, including a top 20 win over Kansas, which hadn't been done since 74. So Illini, rarefied air. Brett Bielema, Burt, taking them to Lincoln. Tripp?
Just quick, do you have any lean on the over-under there, Phil? I see it's all the way down to 42.5.
I like both defenses. They're both playing well. And last week, Nebraska didn't put up as many points as I thought they would in their matchup with Northern Iowa. So I hadn't really thought about that. Let me see what my projection on the game is. I had a 24-14, so I guess I'm leaning under.
Yeah, I would be too. I was going to say, I think like a 20-17, something like that could definitely be in play. All right, wrapping up Friday night in Pullman, a pair of 3-0 teams, San Jose State at Washington State. The Cougs coming off their big win over Washington in the Apple Cup. Quarterback John Mateer, he's looking good so far. Leads the country in yards per completion at 19.2. Only hesitation here for me is it does feel like it could potentially be a letdown spot for the Cougs. They're 12.5. I'm seeing it's down to 11.5 actually today. They're a favorite. They've got Boise State on deck. And San Jose State has showed a pulse on offense. Emmett Brown to Nick Nash, that's been quite the connection there. Any reason to pause on playing the Cougs here in this situation, Phil?
Yeah, well, one of the reasons to have liked Washington State last week was they felt jilted by Washington and the Big Ten, because Washington joined the Big Ten and left them for dead. And then you look at the situation this week, off that big win, Boise State on deck. And guess what? San Jose just got left out of the Pac-12 or Pac-6 as it is right now by them not taking San Jose. So San Jose has that same type of thing going for them. But looking at the two teams, I think Washington State's a superior team. They were able to beat Texas Tech by 18 at home. John Mateer is doing a great job, not only throwing, but running the football. He's the leading rusher with 314 yards. And San Jose State's been a pleasant surprise so far, but they took on a very disappointing Air Force team. They beat an FCS team in Sacramento State. And then last week, I think they took on the weakest team in the FBS in Kennesaw State. So now they're taking on the strongest opponent year to date. I've got Washington State winning this one by 17. The situation favors San Jose State, but the talent favors Washington State, as does the home field.
Let's head to Saturday, Phil. Nooner from Columbus, third-ranked Ohio State, laying a big number, 39.5. 52 is the total, 12 o'clock on Fox. That's mighty big for Charles Huff and Marshall to come in and cover, but he is tampering already with the Buckeyes using Tudor's biscuits. NIL, all you can eat deal. I mean, the Marshall head coach this week, hilarious audio, saying, look, if any of these Ohio State players want to get in the portal and come down to Huntington, we've got an all-you-can-eat biscuit deal that we can hook you up with. Just amazing what we have veered into this lane with NIL. I hadn't seen the open, blatant tampering, especially through food and all you can eat. So good on Charles Huff. Because of that, I think Marshall is going to play inspired and be able to cover the number. Is that too big, though, for you even to touch with a biscuit, Phil?
And how many Ohio State players have transferred after that enticing offer? I mean, for crying out loud, what can Ohio State give them that tops that? You wonder. Looking at this matchup, the thing that scares me with Ohio State is that Ryan Day was talking earlier after the Western Michigan game, how when he puts the second stringers and the third stringers in there, he's really looking for them to produce at a high level because they're going to rely on them for depth later in the year. But I'm bullish on Marshall this year. I think Marshall's got a good defensive front, should be able to slow down Ohio State a little bit. To me, the numbers just up there. I'm sort of staying away from this one. So I'll go with you, Kyle. Kyle likes Marshall. Let's go with Marshall for the TV tour here today.
And it is the final non-conference OSU, tune-up before Big Ten play. They go to East Lansing next week. So, Ryan Day might try to keep some things in the vest, worried about health, pulling the starters earlier. I'm with you. I think Marshall covers the number, Tripp.
Yeah, it's been an absolute gauntlet for the Buckeyes so far. Let's jump over to the ACC. League opener for both NC State and Clemson at noon Saturday, Death Valley. Clemson Tigers, a 20.5-point favorite. The Wolfpack been disappointing so far this year. Big letdown against Tennessee. Didn't look great last week either in a 10-point win over Louisiana Tech. Grayson McCall, the quarterback, gets hurt, so in comes C.J. Bailey, freshman QB. Clemson, on the other hand, last time we saw the Tigers, Cade Klubnik, who I was basically ready to give up on. He looked like Dan Marino as they put up 66 against App State. This is also a little bit of a revenge spot for the Tigers after they lost in Raleigh last year, Phil.
Yeah, legitimate revenge spot, and sometimes revenge is overplayed. And I only consider it revenge if you lost as a favorite the previous year. But what really amplifies my revenge factor is when you outplayed an opponent. And last year, Clemson went into NC State. They had 21 first downs. NC State had 9. Clemson had 364 yards offense. NC State had 202, almost double the yards, almost triple the first downs, and somehow they lost the game. Now they're bent on revenge. The only negative I have here would be going back to last week's Georgia-Kentucky game. Kentucky looked so poor against South Carolina. You thought Georgia was going to smack them, and then Kentucky gave an inspired effort. But this game's in Death Valley. It might be a freshman quarterback and C.J. Bailey making his first start against a very good Clemson defense. And as bad as Clemson's defense looked in the opener, remember they played Georgia's defense. They put up 525 yards in the first half against App State. And I think the key was bringing in their talented true freshman wide receivers and letting them play, like Bryant Wesco, who had a huge game against App State. So I think Clemson's clearly the better team. And when you look at NC State's games this year, I mean, the Western Carolina game was 14-14 at the half. They got destroyed by Tennessee. And last week, they're trailing Louisiana Tech 17-6 at the half, and we're outgained 202-117. They've really been struggling. It's a situation where revenge is on Clemson's side, as is the talent. I'm going to lay the big points here with Clemson.
Yeah, I don't know if motivation is necessarily, or revenge rather, is the play as we go to Stark Vegas for Mississippi State and Florida. It's more so motivation, right? And especially for Florida and Billy Napier trying to, cling to his job, as it seems like he's already been fired, yet he's still there. They had a board meeting this past Sunday. Napier still in position. What is the succession plan? What are you going to do to stop the bleeding, if you will? There doesn't really seem to be a plan with so much, turnover right now going on in the administration roles. So, either way, football game's going to be played, and Florida is a 6-point favorite on the road at Mississippi State, 12 o'clock on ESPN. 58 is the total. I will note that A Florida loss in Starkville, Phil, back in 2004, cost Ron Zook his job.
Wow.
So that makes this a little more of an ominous position for the Gators. 2018 was the last meeting between these two. It was Dan Mullen in his first season coaching Florida, and he beat Joe Moorhead and his former team barely, 13-6. A lot has changed since, Phil. What do you think about the Gators covering the 6 on the road?
Excellent research as always, Kyle. You do a great job on that.
Thank you.
And I always learn something from when we do these, something that I didn't know coming into the week. I liked Florida early in the year. I thought they were going to be a surprise team despite the schedule, and they've really been disappointing. The Texas A&M game, you could shut that thing off at the half. Granted, they came back, scored a few touchdowns, made it 33-20, but that thing was 20-0 at the half, and they had no prayer of winning the game. The Miami of Florida game was equally as ugly. They need to pull it together. At the start of the year, I had Florida 14-point favorite in this game because I thought they were going to be a middle-of-the-road SEC team against one of the weakest teams in the SEC. Mississippi State is one of the weakest teams in the SEC. Remember, they trailed Arizona State 30-3 in that game, and then last week got destroyed by Toledo. Very hesitantly, I'm going to say I'll take Florida minus the points just because they are the better team. Talent-wise, they should be there. And if they play their game, they should be able to go into Starkville and come out with the win. But no way would I put any money on Florida at this point, or Mississippi State for that matter.
The Gators, Bulldogs both have been atrocious in total defense, too, including 101st, 104th in defending third down. So it could be a rock fight, but it could make for an entertaining, even explosive affair at times. I don't know. A lot of unknowns on that one. Charlotte at Indiana. 28.5 is the total for the Hoosiers coming off that beatdown over UCLA at the Rose Bowl. 12 o'clock on the Big Ten Network. Charlotte had to score, I think, 21 fourth-quarter points just to overcome Gardner-Webb last week, 27-26 for Biff Poggi and the 49ers picking up their first win of the year. Kurt Cignetti. They had IU fans were brandishing Marlboro-like T-shirts with this man on the T-shirts. Indiana fans are all in. Cignetti is becoming a trend that no one could have imagined. Him being at IU at this point, the excitement, he's slamming referees after the UCLA game, calling them Mickey Mouse refs. I mean, this guy brings, you talk about brashness with Biff Poggi. How'd you like to get Poggi and Cignetti in a ring together and see him box? It's a big number. It is 28.5. I don't think it's big enough, though, Phil, because it seems like Cignetti and IU just wants to put the pedal to the metal and just pile on as many points as they can and score every time. Otherwise, he's going to be furious.
Yeah, I agree. Cignetti is a put the hammer down coach this year with Indiana. He's trying to set an attitude, and I watched him pace the sidelines against Western Illinois when they were up big at the half. It's 42-3, and the halftime interview, he's like, well, we'll see. We got a whole second half to play, and we got to play the entire 60 minutes. And then last week against UCLA, even after the game was over, they're like, well, how do you feel, coach? He's like, we gave up that touchdown right before the half. That really bothers me. And so here's a coach that's going to keep pressing the entire game. He wants to have this team learn a brand new attitude. He's been very successful at it. Delivered a big win for me last week at UCLA. And Charlotte has just not looked good this year. You go back to the James Madison game. I thought they played a good first half, but then got blown away in the second half. North Carolina, somewhat competitive game for a while, but as you mentioned, needed a big comeback just to get past Gardner-Webb. And Gardner-Webb, I believe, lost their head coach, lost a bunch of players from last year. So this is a game where I do look for Indiana to win this thing by more than the 28.5. My computer's got it 45-7. I believe that because Cignetti, late third quarter, early fourth quarter, he's not going to let up and say, okay, let's play the backups. This game's over. He's going to be pushing them the full 60 minutes.
Yeah, and reigning Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week, Curtis Rourke, a former MAC dude out of Ohio, 4 TDs, 307 passing yards last week. First Hoosiers quarterback to throw 4+ TDs since Michael Penix.
And I think he was like 9 for 9 on third down in that game.
Yeah, he was incredible.
All right, we talked about, I guess, back in the week 1 show, the opportunity for UNC, if they could win that opener on the road at Minnesota. They had a really manageable first half of the year on their schedule. Well, they won that game, and now they're 3-0. They're back at home this week. Noon kick with JMU in town. The Hills could be on their third starting quarterback of the season if they end up going with Jacoby Criswell this week. If he gets the start, it does look like they're going to be able to push it down the field a little bit more with him opposed to Connor Harrell. JMU's off a bye here, but honestly, I'm surprised the 10.5 number. I would have thought it was a little closer to 2 touchdowns here. Any value with the Tar Heels this week, Phil?
Yeah, the only negative I have is I think the last 4 times North Carolina's played a Sun Belt team, the game's been decided by 7 or less, so they usually play down to their opponent. Also, North Carolina is always known for blowing a game as a big favorite during the course of the year. But you hit it. Connor Harrell started last week, hit 2 of 6. They brought in Criswell off the bench, gave them a little bit more life. In fact, that thing was close at the half last week. It was only 17-10 against NC Central. Then they blew them out in the second half. But Amarian Hampton is running the ball well. And JMU has not been impressive. I talked about Gardner Webb, and I thought Gardner Webb was down this year. JMU battled a close game against Gardner Webb last week. They did beat Charlotte, a game that Charlotte gave them a game in the first half despite missing 4 or 5 starters for the game. I know Biff came out and said they were going to be missing about 8 starters, but I think it was actually 4 that they were missing for the game. So not blown away by JMU so far this year. North Carolina has looked impressive. They got at Duke, home to Pitt, home to Georgia Tech, at Virginia, and then even at Florida State. Where's the loss on this schedule? This could be a team that finds itself in the ACC. I agree with you 100%, Tripp. Great analysis. I thought North Carolina would be a 14-point favorite here, and that's where I like that Tar Heels.
Kansas is catching 2.5 on the road at West Virginia, Phil. 12 o'clock on ESPN2. 56 is the total. Both teams are 1-2. Disappointing through the first 3 weeks, given the expectations coming in. Jayhawks dropped their decision last week in KC to UNLV. Tripp, you want to gloat on your UNLV pick? That was your top power play from last week, and you hit on it.
I did like UNLV last week a lot. I think that's another team with an opportunity, maybe not as easy of a schedule as UNC, because they do have Syracuse coming up. But UNLV, one of the things I mentioned with them, not to go too far down the rabbit hole, but Sluka, we talked about, his completion percentage wasn't so great, but he could make a lot of plays with his legs. That's exactly what he did against Kansas last week. And just watching him again, it does worry me a little bit that he's got like a 7-foot tall tight end and he's throwing it 10 feet over his head. Great win for UNLV, but maybe I'm pumping my brakes a little bit on just how much I was buying those guys.
So you would sell now on the Rebels. Nonetheless,
I'll just hold. How about
okay,
I'm going to hold for right now.
Well, they beat the Jayhawks last week, who have lost 2 in a row now. Illinois before that. West Virginia losing the backyard brawl 38-34, despite leading by 10, Phil, with 4:55 to go in that ball game. Huge inflection point for both teams at this stage of the season. It's moving day this week. Like I said, contenders and pretenders. We're going to get that this Saturday. I'm in an empty apartment. I'm moving myself today, Phil. Tell me about this matchup Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, and I like West Virginia at home. They're a tough team to beat at home. I think had they held on to that lead against Pitt, and as you mentioned, led by 10 with like 5 minutes to go in the game, they'd probably be closer to a 7-point favorite here. And that's what I think the line should be. I think they should be about a 7-point favorite. Now, if you're going to beat West Virginia, you got to be able to throw the ball. We saw that at the end of the game with Eli Holstein. We saw Albany, I should say, throw the ball on them, and even Penn State had great success. So far this year, Jalen Daniels, 3 touchdown passes, 6 interceptions. So Jalen Daniels is a very dangerous runner. I don't think he's going to be able to beat West Virginia's secondary consistently. On the flip side of the ball, Garrett Green's a dangerous runner and passer. They've got C.J. Donaldson, Jalen White. I picked West Virginia higher in the Big 12 this year than Kansas. I know Kansas was a trendy preseason pick. They were up there by most of the Big 12 people. I had a middle of the pack. So I think West Virginia's better team at home and they match up well. I'm going to go with West Virginia minus the points in this one. And surprised the number's so cheap at 2.
Well, I'll go ahead and take a shot here with one of my plays this week. I like the under in that game, under 56. I thought even though Kansas, they weren't able to stop UNLV coming down the stretch in the fourth quarter, but it's just one of those games, quarterbacks making plays. I don't even think UNLV threw the ball in the fourth quarter from what I remember, but I do think Kansas has a pretty decent defense, and I think this could be a little bit of a muddy it up game, and I like the
Well,
under 56.
as Phil's magazine indicates, the over has hit in 6 of the last 7 between these two. So you're
I
going
like the
opposite
under.
of that.
I like the under.
All right. Okay.
All right, let's jump to Virginia at Coastal Carolina. Undefeated Coastal Carolina at home, 2:00 kick in Conway. The Shots averaging 251 rushing yards per game, 41 points per game. Competition level hasn't been great so far. Only an 8-point win over Temple last week, which was a little concerning. UVA, on the other hand, nice win at Wake in week 2, but they got outscored 20-0 in the second half last week against Maryland. Statistically, they're pretty bad on defense, but they're a 3.5-point favorite on the road. Any chance for an upset this week in Conway, Phil?
Yeah, I think there is definitely a chance for an upset here. And this one, I do a Phil Steele Plus tour with selections, and I've got this up there. I show you the schedule that I have on Phil Steele Tour, or the schedule with a lot of best bets. And I wasn't really looking at this game, but my plus minus ratings have Coastal by 5. My average game grade has Coastal winning this by like 10. And it's a situation play. And let me explain the situation play to you. Look at Coastal's month of September. They play Jack State, William and Mary, Temple, and Virginia, and they have a bye. What's their most important game in the entire month of September? It's Virginia. Let's look at Virginia's schedule. They played at Wake Forest, conference game, Maryland, an old conference rival, and now they're playing Coastal Carolina. It's their third most important game, and they're off back-to-back big games, now playing their third most important game. So the situation favors Coastal. The average game grade favors Coastal. They're playing to an average game grade so far this year of 100.9, and Virginia's playing to an average game grade of 90, so 90 something. So that's a big advantage there. Add it all up. I wasn't looking at the game at the start of the week, but I think Coastal can pull the upset. And frankly, getting 3.5 is nice because you're getting the line value there. You could lose this game by a field goal and still cover. So I like Coastal plus the points. And Virginia's game grade I'm looking at right now is 93. So Coastal a clear-cut favorite in the average game grade.
Yeah, and I thought Coastal played. They've kind of got this new, almost triple option-esque type offense that they're rolling out, and I thought they play. I know Temple is nothing. We're about to get to Temple, but Coastal won 28-20, and I think there were patches where they looked more than functional and at least capable now at home, getting the Cavaliers, who are still rebuilding under Tony Elliott, at home. So I do think that's a good spot for a home dog in Coastal.
And let me throw something out there. Studying Temple, what they did the last 2 years, they actually held Navy to season lows. Temple, the one good thing they've done is defend the option, and they were taking on the option for the second time in 3 weeks last week when they played Coastal. So that was an advantage to Temple clearly in that game.
Well, they've had trouble defending other offenses, but the option, yes, has kind of been their specialty. They've rose to the occasion because their defense is allowing 358. Utah State is averaging 455. The two are going to meet here on Saturday at 2:00 on ESPN+. So if you like defense, this might not be the game for you. The Aggies are laying 6 on the road as the favorite. 54 is the total. First meeting ever, Utah State visiting the East Coast in non-con again after last year winning over UConn by blocking a PAT with 40 seconds left to earn a 34-33 win. This one, Phil, might be just as slimy between some normally suspect defenses against conventional offenses. Owls are winless at home. At the link earlier this week, the home fans left pretty unhappy after the Falcons and Kirk Cousins' stunning upset. I like Temple to maybe come through with a home win as a home dog in this one. What says you?
Yeah, I probably lean with Temple. I was surprised the number was up there at 6 because Utah State hasn't really done much this year. They lost their head coach prior to the year. They lost a couple of players due to injury and or transfer. Didn't even show up in the USC game. I thought they played a really good first half against Utah. They actually had the yardage edge in the game. Only were down by 3 points. And then the second half didn't go well. So they've been playing better. I'm hoping to see some life out of them because I did pick them higher in the Mountain West standings than most. So it'd be nice to that was prior to Anderson getting fired. So I didn't know that was going to happen when I wrote the magazine. But as mentioned, Temple held Oklahoma to 378 yards, which is a pretty good defense. They slowed Navy down. There's a couple of big plays that cost them in that one. And then they really slowed Coastal Carolina down. So their defense is playing better than expected. In fact, here's a stat for you. watching the Oklahoma Temple game before Oklahoma scored their final touchdown. They were 0 for 12 on third down against this Temple defense. So I think Temple's sort of sneaky under the radar. They were bad last year. They're 0-3 this year. Nobody's going to play them. This might be the spot. So good call there, Kyle.
Love it.
Let's move to the 3:30 window. The Big House. We've got Michigan and USC. Another big helmet game, and Michigan, again, at home, finds itself as the dog once again. USC favored by, it looks like it's down to 5 right now is what I'm seeing. Wolverine's been pretty underwhelming so far this year. Obviously, they're missing a lot of pieces from last year's title team. USC is coming off a bye going into this game. D'Anton Lynn, I think he's also giving some Trojan fans a little bit of hope that the defense isn't going to be that turnstile that it's been for the last few years. What do you like here, Phil?
This to me is, first of all, I love the uniforms. I mean, I'm from Ohio. You know, my favorite football helmet is? It's Michigan's. I love their helmet. And USC, can you imagine the color in this game? Should be awesome. So I think it's going to be a fun game coming into it. Michigan has got their back to the wall. They do have a good defense. I know they give up some yards and points against Texas, but Texas, pretty good offense. And now they're taking on USC. It's Miller Moss's first road start. Overall, I've been much more impressed with USC this year. They do have a vastly improved defense. Last year, D'Anton Lynn at UCLA, they improved by 100 yards per game. I expect USC to improve by 100 yards per game this year because they brought in a ton of transfers as well. I think it's going to be just a great game to watch and learn about the both teams. It would be, I don't think you're going to see Michigan get blown out like they did against Texas because USC is not Texas. USC is USC. And while I just think it's going to be a great game to watch. Should be a lot of fun.
The number's 28 for Notre Dame at home against Miami. 17th ranked Fighting Irish. I expect have put a check in the mail for me after raking them through the coals last week. Phil, I know you weren't moving off the Irish, and man, did they come through 66-7. The butt kicking at Purdue at Ross-Ade Stadium. That was the most lopsided victory in the 88 meetings all time in that series. 362 rushing yard effort against the Boilers, 278 coming in the first half. They rode that 42-0 halftime lead en route to that 66-7 final. The thing about this one, Phil, is we've talked about Chuck Martin before. A couple weeks past, we brought him up. He was upset his kicker was, allegedly stolen from him by Alabama. Chuck Martin, Southside Irish, Chicago guy, much like me, grew up in Park Forest, loved Notre Dame, much like me. The coach there was the OC under Brian Kelly at one time when they played for the national championship in 2012. I listened to a podcast with him today with Pete Sampson of The Athletic, him and Matt Fortuna, the Independent. This guy's the biggest Notre Dame stan in the world. Like, he is a super fan. You cut him open, he's bleeding Notre Dame gold out of his arm. He is the head coach of Miami playing at Notre Dame. This is not fun for him. He doesn't like this. He's a fan 365 of Notre Dame, but he can't be this weekend. I feel like Notre Dame might take it easy a little bit on this guy. I would take Miami in this position against the Irish.
Yeah, and I don't really have a clear interest in this game for that reason. And then the other one would be Notre Dame lost a couple of offensive linemen last week. So I'm getting a little concerned. I know they ran the ball at will on Purdue, but now you're down a couple of offensive linemen. You do have a big game against Louisville on deck. The thing with Miami and Chuck Martin, though, it was about 5-6 years ago. He stopped, put full effort into the non-conference games. And what happened was he started winning MAC titles. They would do well in conference play. So I wonder if this is one of those. And I talked to a lot of Group of 5 coaches this year. And I would say, what's your strategy against this big boy or that big boy? And a lot of them would say, you know what, we got to come out of there healthy. That's the main thing. And Notre Dame's a very physical team. So I think the line's where it should be for the game. I have no interest. But here, the official play for our show today is going to be Kyle taking Miami of Ohio.
Yes, give me Miami going against Fighting Irish in back-to-back weeks. And Ashton Craig, the latest one to go down along that offensive line. Injuries are continuing to pile up. Already a shorthanded unit. And Notre Dame's got Louisville visiting South Bend next week. So at least it's Miami, Phil, for Notre Dame, for them to kind of build some reps, meaningful reps for the new offensive line. However, we're saying that about a team who lost to Northern Illinois. So I don't know what I'm getting week to week.
Northern Illinois is really good.
They are. But you lose to NIU, you could. It's another MAC team. How about the MAC, Phil? Let's give you a moment. I mean, you got Toledo going to Mississippi State last week. Look at NIU. I mean, the MAC. Look, we'll see what Miami can do. But the MAC is putting themselves, I think, in a conversation. It's been maybe a decade where they've been making this much noise, it feels like.
You know what's fun too is talking to all these group of five coaches that this 12-team playoff has energized all five conferences that in the group of five. They all know if they win and they are the highest ranked group of five team, they can actually make the playoff. And right now you have to look at teams like Toledo and Northern Illinois and say, you know what? They run the rest of the schedule. They've got that big win under their belt. They could very well make the playoffs. So I think it's pretty exciting. And it's exciting for the MAC as well.
Yeah, it has made it a lot of fun for these G5 teams, more so than we've ever had because of the new expanded playoff where everyone feels like they got a shot vying for that one G5 position. Brought up the Cardinals, who have Notre Dame last week. They are hosting Georgia Tech Saturday. These two played at the Benz last year, 3:30 start on ESPN2. Louisville won 39-34 last year. They've won 8 straight ACC home games. Tremendous quarterback matchup. Haynes King, 6-1 ratio. Tyler Shuck, 6 scores, 0 picks. Tech 8-3 against the spread in the last 11 games, Phil. You know where I'm going with this. Double-digit underdog, 5 outright wins. Brent Key, a cash cow in this sort of role.
Unbelievable. It's an amazing stat to me. I mean, you go back to Brent Key, his first game, 3-touchdown dog to Pitt, pull the upset. 3-touchdown dog later in the season to a ranked ACC team, pull the upset. Last year, twice he was a double-digit dog versus a ranked ACC team, won them both outright and did it again against Florida State. So he's 5-0 straight up, all his double-digit dogs against ranked ACC teams. And guess what? He had a ranked ACC team and was favored at Syracuse and lost that game. So the ranked team in a Georgia Tech game is now 6-0 against this, or 0-6 against the spread. And yeah, I got to love Georgia Tech here. Brent Key, I think each of those games, I said, well, Georgia Tech can't win this game straight up. They might cover, and then he wins it straight up. So it's just a remarkable stat. And like I said, the Syracuse game, they were down by 17, but they were in an uncomfortable role. They were favored, and they were ranked. Now they're back into that comfortable role of being an underdog. I think they could pull the upset here.
Yeah, I like that pick as well. Shass, you sold me on Arkansas last week. I looked up at the TV.
They let me down.
Around 4 o'clock. I had to wipe my glasses off because I'm looking at they're trailing UAB 17-3. Arkansas ends up getting the win. They didn't cover. I think that hurt all three of us. We were all on Arkansas last week.
This is the kind of thing that drives Arkansas fans crazy, though, about Sam Pittman. I mean, this is what we're talking about. Like, just when it looks good, you lay an egg like that against UAB. I don't know.
Well, this week, Talon Green and company, they hit the road to take on Auburn. 3:30 kick and Jordan Hare. The Tigers have won 8 out of the last 10 in this series. They're a field goal favorite at home. Watch out for Hank Brown. Got his first start last week as the Auburn quarterback. That's just a good, strong name right there. If I wanted a quarterback, like if I'm going to name him, Hank Brown's right up there at the top of the list. What's your take here, Phil?
You know, I'm going to agree with you 1,000%. My dad's name was Hank, and when he was in the Marine Corps, they called him Hank the Tank. So it is a strong name. I love anybody named Hank, and shout out to my dad way up there. But Arkansas, here's an amazing stat for you guys. Do you know that the visitor has covered 12 straight Arkansas games, FBS versus FBS? So when Arkansas is on the road, play them. When they're at home, fade them. It's that simple. Wow. And this is one where Pittman's a great away dog. Last year, they went on the road to LSU, Mississippi, Alabama, covered all 3 games. And Auburn hasn't blown me away. You know, the Cal game, they struggled. They do have a new quarterback. They've got an upgraded receiving core. They got Jarquez Hunter. But Sam Pittman and company know how to go on the road and get the win. And they should have beaten Oklahoma State. They probably could have been up 28-0 at the half, if not for their return for a touchdown that they gave up. And that would have iced the game at Oklahoma State. So I'm going to go with Arkansas plus the points to pull the upset here. And shout out to Hank there.
You know, I'm a Hank myself. I'm the third Henry. That's why they call me Tripp.
Nice.
Yeah. I'm glad this game's up next. Northern Illinois, Buffalo on the road at NIU. We were just talking about Northern Illinois. They're ranked now. They're a 14-point favorite. Phil, it sounds like you like Northern Illinois here.
I do. And, talking to Coach Hammock this year, going over the team with him, you go every position, veteran group. And then we get to the end. He's like, Phil, we got 36 seniors on this year's squad. And I'm like, damn, yeah, you do. And they're big on the offensive line. They're big on the defensive line. They're a legitimate team. And that Notre Dame game is not as big a upset as you think, because Northern Illinois at the end of the year could have a really good record. They may be favored next week at NC State. So that's interesting. Now, I'm a little worried about the NC State, and Hammock's not a great home favorite, but this is by far his best team. And with Buffalo, I think Pete Lembo stepped into a tough situation. Late coaching change. Coach didn't leave him a lot. There wasn't a lot of talent on hand. Lembo's a great coach. But last week they didn't blow me away against UMass. The yards were close. The first downs weren't a big dominant. They got a couple of big plays for scores. They got shut out by Missouri on the road and beat a Lafayette team that's been struggling this year. This may be where Buffalo gets exposed. I think it's one of the best teams in the MAC against one of the weakest teams in the MAC. Northern Illinois is at home. I like the Huskies in this one.
That might be one of my own power plays. Sneak peek at what we have coming. Phil will give his top 3 plays of the week here in the next 15 minutes or so. And Coach Hammock, one of 120 head coaches, Phil, that you talked to, of 133 across all of Division I, set a record for a 6th straight year with the magazine. Again, go to philsteele.com. More information, limited space. So much more is available. Info about Phil Steele Plus. You mentioned the Phil Steele Plus YouTube tour with selections. That's already live at Phil Steele 042 is where you can find him on Twitter, on X, and they'll direct you to the YouTube page where you can get a glimpse there. Info about Inside the Press Box as well, which covers the FCS. Let's go to the Big 12 opener. Arizona State is on the road at Texas Tech. Red Raiders are laying 3 at last glance. 60 is the total. Fox Sports 1, 330 is the kick here. 5th meeting overall. These two teams split the previous 4. Red Raiders blasted North Texas. You talk about rallying from the loss in Pullman the week prior. They had a school record 52-point first half effort en route to a 66-21 win. And the Sun Devils were impressive, grinding one out at Texas State, who had all the momentum of the home crowd. You have the conversations about the future of the Pac-12 and conference realignment. Nice national stage for Texas State to showcase themselves. And they forced 3 Sun Devil turnovers, but Arizona State was able to overcome that and win by a field goal. This is shaping up to be a better matchup than what we would have thought a week prior, Phil. What do you think here?
Yeah, absolutely. And I got to look towards the over in this game, just with the fact that both teams' offenses have exploded. Remember last year, Arizona State, their offensive line was all beat up. Remember, they couldn't even attempt a field goal because they didn't have enough offensive linemen for it. And then they ended up going for it on 4th down, turn it over. It was a key play to a game last year. This year, their offense looks a lot better. Sam Leavitt at quarterback, Scattaboo at running back, and a now veteran offensive line. So they are more potent and have been very impressive. In fact, Mississippi State, they led that game 30-3 for crying out loud. Could have won it easier. But Texas Tech, you talked about it. I'm watching my 9 games. There's only 9 games on at the time as opposed to the usual 12, but it was early in the day. And I look at the TV and it's like 14-7. And the next time I looked at it, it was 35-7. And I saw the interception return and for a touchdown, which really helped. They had a 70-yard touchdown pass. But it's amazing how they put up 52 points in the first half last week. Taj Brooks did not play against Washington State. He did play last week. Taj Brooks is back. I think that's a big difference. So I'm going to go with the over. What's the total on this one, Kyle? Or Tripp?
I'm seeing 60. What do you got, Tripp?
I know it's somewhere around in there. Let's see.
59.5.
Yeah, that seems pretty cheap for these two teams, doesn't it?
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, that's probably the play. I'm going to put a star by that one too. Tripp, tell us about Memphis and Navy.
Yeah, let's talk about Memphis, a team that cannot be trusted after only winning by 8 in Tallahassee last week. Just an embarrassment against the worst team in college football, my Florida State Seminoles. So how are they going to cover 9 at Navy? Memphis, coming off the FSU win, they're taking on – Navy hasn't really played anybody yet, so that worries me a little bit. But I think statistically right now, Navy's like a top 20 offense in the country. Not sure if we can trust those numbers. And Memphis only allowing under 70 rushing yards per game. So if Navy can't run, I'm not sure if they can win. But it's the spot here with Memphis. And look, if you watch the Florida State game, I know Florida State's not very good this year, but I do think Memphis was very much up for that game. They were kind of playing with their hair on fire. It is a little bit of a letdown spot here. What do you like, Phil?
Yeah, I think it's a big letdown spot. And Navy's fresh off a bye. So this is Navy's Super Bowl here for per se. And it's their first conference game for them. So they're pretty excited. And Memphis just got the game they really, really, really wanted, which was beat Florida State on the road. So I think the situation clearly favors Navy. And keep in mind, when you're defending the option, it's not like you're defending a normal run team. And they took on Troy, who doesn't have a great rush attack. They took on North Alabama, doesn't have a great rush attack. And Florida State's offensive line hasn't lived up to what we thought it would be at the start of the year. And they got behind and they had to throw the ball. They actually threw the ball 31 times and only ran at 24 in that game against Memphis. I think Navy will threaten them with their rush attack. That'll shrink the game as well. So with the fact that the spread's over a touchdown here, I like Navy. I like them to shrink the game, which would lead me towards the under a little bit. But I also like Navy plus the points. I think it's the situation clearly favors the midshipmen.
Here's the snap. Here's the pressure. Underlay rolling to his right, buying himself time, putting it up for grabs. It's not going to make the end zone. And it is knocked down. Incomplete. The Tigers pull it off. 3-0. They get $1.3 million and a W here in Tallahassee.
Yep.
How about that, Tiger fans?
Didn't think I was going to have to hear that twice. We heard that. We caught that live on the Blitz. Didn't think I would have to hear it again. Thank you.
Twist of the knife. Dave Wolshin and the boys on the Memphis Tigers radio network from Learfield. Again, catch that. You catch that live on the Varsity Network app. Be sure to download it. Had to dig in just one more time for you, Tripp, on that one. Let's go to the Bayou. 16th ranked LSU laying 24. It's huge against UCLA, is returning the trip that the Tigers made to the Rose Bowl a couple years back. 340. This is the kick time now we're doing for the SEC on ABC. We're actually advertising 340, which as long as it's accurate, I'm good for it. 340 is the time. Remember when LSU went to UCLA? Ed Orgeron was the head coach, was talking about the sissy blue shirts, and then the Bruins actually put the smack down on LSU. So you talk about revenge. This could be a moment for LSU, although the faces and characters are completely different this time, especially with Deshaun Foster, whose hands are entirely full. I don't know if they're going to win another game at UCLA. How about LSU, though? The resiliency, Phil, of Garrett Nussmeier last week, down 17-0, to waver through some mistakes, to overcome it, to use his grit. The rest of the team really responded. Brian Kelly had those guys, prepared. Maybe not necessarily exactly the way he would have wrote the script, but the way they came back, avoided a potential field goal that would have tied the game at the end, and they went on to win at South Carolina 36-33. 11 straight wins at Tiger Stadium. Brian Kelly 14-1 in Death Valley. They'll get the win, but can they cover the 24?
Yeah, and that's the big thing. South Carolina could easily have won last week's game. I had South Carolina last week. I quit commenting after the first quarter. We should be up by more. And we just weren't. And then let LSU back in the game. And, of course, the interception return for a touchdown was great. It clinched it for South Carolina, and then they go and hit the quarterback like they did, and LSU escapes with the win. I wasn't blown away with what LSU did against Nichols. They actually allowed 295 yards against Nichols, and the previous week, Nichols had 200 yards against Louisiana Tech, and I wasn't blown away with the USC outcome either. So LSU still has to prove to me that they are that elite team that can cover a 24-point number. UCLA didn't look good, but that's a really good Indiana team. They do have Oregon, Penn State on deck. Well, it's going to get ugly for UCLA, isn't it? But the spread's pretty high. So it's a game I personally wouldn't bet. But I think if I'm going to lean one way, I was on the podcast with Steven and Wayne, and I gave Wayne a little bit of thing. I said, I'll take UCLA plus the points in this one. What the heck, Wayne? So it's a pretty high number.
Wayne needed that, I'm sure. He needed that in his life.
He did. He was pretty hurting after the Indiana game.
I'm sure. Should be a very good game in Stillwater on Saturday. Utah at Oklahoma State, 4 o'clock kick between a pair of undefeateds. These two haven't met in 79 years, so I didn't bother looking up the last score when they played in that last meeting. I'm sure you've got all that stuff, Phil. Big story here. Cam Rising for Utah looks like he is expected to play. Very tight spread. It's down to 1.5 right now with the Utes favored. I know you guys have probably heard this line on the QBs and how old they are. Rising's 25, Bowman's 24. We've got younger matchups in the NFL this coming week. Another thing here for Oak State, the Pokes have got to get Ollie Gordon going if they want to have a chance to win here. What's your play, Phil?
Yeah, and the spread actually moved, Kyle. You can look this up. I thought Oklahoma State became the favorite by 2.5.
Yeah, it has shifted. OK State 2.5 is what I'm seeing most recently.
Now
so
that
it
kind of
shifted
line
back.
move makes me wonder if Rising's going to play when I see that kind of line move. So I have no interest in this game. I think Utah's a better team. Cam Rising plays. They go into Oklahoma State and win. Arkansas could easily have won here, and Utah's the better team. But Cam Rising not playing, then I don't know. And we don't know if Cam Rising's going to play. Remember last year, hey, Cam Rising might play this week. No, he didn't. Cam Rising might play this week. No, he didn't. Cam Rising could play this week. No, he didn't. Then they finally said he was out for the year. So you never know what you're going to get with the Cam Rising situation. I do think Utah is a better team if he's playing and close to 100%. They go on the road and get the win. But I'm staying away from this one. How about you guys?
I think I will now. I didn't realize because last night I think we still had Utah as a slight favorite for that to move 3
spread
points
moving
just
one day
overnight. Yeah, somebody knows something somewhere, and I don't know that somebody, so I'll stay away as well.
Should be a great crowd. It's a passionate fan base. I'm expecting them to be extremely quiet for us out of respect to me and our program too. So.
Jeff Heupel, the Tennessee head coach, before he returns to Norman earlier this week. So much intrigue. Star quarterback, led him to a national championship over your Florida State Seminoles there, Tripp, back in,
big
week
2013?
FSU jazz.
Trip day?
We had no business losing that game, too. That was so embarrassing.
13-2?
If Snoop Menace would have played, we would have won 14-13.
Oh my gosh. Played quarterback, coach there for 10 years, now returned to Norman. Won he was the runner-up to the Heisman Trophy winner, which was FSU's Chris Winkie at OU, had the last laugh, winning quarterback under Bob Stoops. So, and it's also the SEC opener for OU as the backdrop with Fowler and Herbie and Holly Rowe there for the main game on ESPN ABC. So 7:30, Phil, again, this is the headliner. 7 points is the spread, is what I'm seeing. Tennessee favored by 57.5 the total. I like the Vols here, but this is you don't get these home crowds at OU because Texas is the neutral site game at the State Fair at the Cotton Bowl. This might be the biggest game in a decade since maybe Notre Dame visited at OU. Those fans are going to be ratcheted up, although it might be like a nervous anxiety at the same time, knowing what their offense has done.
Yeah, I think when I look at this game, if you ask my computer the average game grade, Tennessee's number 1 in the country right now, 133.3. Oklahoma hasn't looked that great. I mentioned the Temple game wasn't as good as the final. They barely got past Houston, got outgained in the game. Last week, Tulane had the ball down by 5, 2 different drives, and then Oklahoma got 2 late scores to get the cover. They have not looked good. So the average game grade has Oklahoma as the number 35 team in the country and Tennessee number 1. That says take the Bulls. But this is Nico Iamaleava's first road start. If Tennessee doesn't run the ball well, they struggle. There was 4 games last year they didn't run for 150 yards. They lost all 4. Oklahoma's got a really good run defense. This may be one of Brett Venables' better defenses that he's put on the field. You've got the night crowd, which will be all juiced up, as you touched about, one of the biggest home games that Oklahoma's touched on, or had for 10 years. And I think Jackson Arnold gives Oklahoma a nice weapon on offense, somebody that can hurt you with both his legs and his arm. I look for Oklahoma, which may have gone through the motions against 3-week teams, to give their A-game effort here. And let's go back to that NC State game for a minute. Remember, it's 10-3. This is NC State, a team that's really struggling this year. 10-3 in the second quarter. They get the interception return for a touchdown. And then after that, NC State mailed it in. I think as long as Oklahoma doesn't do something like that, they stay in this one. I'm going to go against the grain. Take Oklahoma plus the points.
First Big Ten game for the Washington Huskies Saturday night. They'll take on Northwestern in Seattle. The Dogs coming off that loss in the Apple Cup. It came down to the last play in that one. I think the problem for Washington last week, they couldn't convert all those red zone trips to touchdowns. They had to keep settling for field goals against the Cougs. Also, penalties were a big story in that game. 16 penalties for over 100 yards. No way they can do that again if they're going to take care of business against Northwestern. Spread's 10.5. What do you like in this one, Phil?
I think the number's a little high. I like Jack Lausch at the quarterback for Northwestern. Now, granted, he took on Eastern Illinois last week, and I think was close at the half, but I think he gives him a better presence at the quarterback, a little bit better reading the defenses. Mike Wright's a great athlete, but Jack Lausch might be the better quarterback, which I feel he is, and I think he gets a start here. Their defense is still playing well, despite the fact that they're 2-1 and lost to Duke at home. It's a game they could easily have won. So I think that this is a game where neither team is that much better than the other. Washington does rate the home field edge. I'd have Washington by about 7. So if you're getting 10.5 in this one, I'm going to lean with the Wildcats.
Phil, as we wind down our week 4 edition, I'm going to give you a 2-for-1 here, and then Tripp will hit on another before we go chasing and give our power plays. Which underdog's more likely to cover here? The home dog in Minnesota. They are catching 3 from Iowa. 36 is the over-under, by the way. 7:30 on NBC. The Floyd of Rosedale is at stake. Golden Gophers have dropped 10 of 12, yet they won last year because a punt return for a touchdown was called back as the fair catch. Still, Minnesota has had the edge here most recently, but they're 3-point dogs at home. And then you got Michigan State going to Boston College. BC is laying 7. And it was announced earlier this week, this is the red bandana game. Here just more than a week removed from the September 11th terrorist attacks that we celebrate, or remember would be the more appropriate word, annually. And we know how geared up the BC guys get for that game. For Wells Crowther, the former lacrosse player, given the red bandana when he was 6 and was one of those heroes who saved several lives in the World Trade Centers, and BC pays homage in a huge way. So which dog most likely to cover? Who do you like in either of those two?
I like both favorites, so neither dog. I think Iowa's better. And here's a question I have with Iowa, though. And I'll hone in on that one because red bandana, I'm going to take Boston College every time. But with Iowa, why are they giving up big plays? Last week against Troy, they played really good defense, but they gave up 2 deep touchdown passes and a punt return touchdown, and that's why they only won by 17. But the previous week against Iowa State, 70-yard touchdown pass. They ought to fire that defensive coordinator. He's no good, right?
I'm with you. Yeah, I agree.
We're being facetious. They've got one of the best defensive coordinators in college football, Phil Parker, naturally. But I'm shocked that a Phil Parker defense has given up 3 long touchdown passes in a 2-week span.
It's unacceptable, Phil. It's unacceptable.
All right, I want to squeeze in a pretty interesting matchup in College Station Saturday night. A&M hosting Bowling Green. If you remember in week 2, it was Bowling Green that had all those Penn State fans biting their pillows for about 3.5 quarters in Happy Valley. Now they take on the Aggies, also off a big win. Texas A&M is coming out of the swamp. It was kind of an eye-opener. Quarterback Marcel Reed stepped in for Wegman. Looked pretty good. Running game was clicking. They outgained Florida 488 to 301. But I don't know. Bowling Green seems a little dangerous here with getting, 23, 24 points?
Yeah, and my average game grades only have Texas A&M playing at a 6 points higher than Bowling Green so far this season. And as you mentioned, Bowling Green led Penn State 24-20 at the half, had a 286, 236-yard edge. They've got Connor Bazelak at quarterback. Why is that important? He has a lot of SEC road starts under his belt when he was back in Missouri. So that's a nice thing to have. And the Marcel Reed thing might have taken Florida a little by surprise. Having a mobile quarterback like that won't take BG by surprise. BG is 9-2-1 against the spread versus the SEC, and a great away favorite, I think, or away dog, I should say. I think they're 11-5. And I'll just go back to what Coach Loeffler told me his first year at Bowling Green. He said the first year, Phil, and this is what he told me the first year. He said, we're going to suck. And he said the second year, we're going to suck less. And then the third year, we'll start playing better. And then he laid it out. And they got to a bowl game last year. So they've been on that progression, played a great game against Penn State. A&M's in a SEC sandwich here. I'm going to take BG plus the points.
What about Baylor, Colorado? 8 o'clock kick on Fox. Interesting matchup. Baylor's got the top-ranked passing defense this year. They're going to need it against Colorado, against Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, the rest of that offense. Sanders completing 70% of his passes, about to surpass 1,000 yards on the year, but he's been on the run a lot, especially in the first 2 games. Baylor day-to-day on their quarterback situation right now, not quite sure if we're going to see Finn or Robertson on Saturday. But it's a tight spread, 1.5 being laid by Colorado. You got a pick here?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Dave Aranda's defense. They're allowing just 230 yards per game. He took over the defensive signal calling this year, thought an advantage would be switching the offense to the spread so his defense could face it in practice every day, and it's had the effect that he wanted. I like Baylor to go on the road and get that win.
Two more for you, Phil. You feel strongly about either of these in the late night chase session. We won't talk Hawaii hosting Northern Iowa, but Portland State, hopefully they've overcome that whooping cough that caused the cancellation of a game against South Dakota last week. 5 course of antibiotics to get that Vikings locker room healthy ahead of a trip to Boise State, who's laying 41.5, 945 FS1. Otherwise, 13th ranked Kansas State looks so impressive at home with Avery Johnson against Arizona last week, picking up the win, still undefeated, laying 6.5, 48 total at BYU, 10:30 on ESPN. I like both of the favorites to obviously. Well, I wouldn't say obviously. BYU could give K-State a scare here. I think Boise State could cover and will. Kansas State, I'm not so sure about, though, Phil.
Yeah, I'm not wild about either game. I do like the Hawaii game, though. I think Hawaii's laying 7.5 to Northern Iowa. Northern Iowa lost their quarterback last week. Now, granted, the backup played decently in that game, but Hawaii's at home, catching them on a long trip, and Northern Iowa is down a few notches this year. I like Hawaii minus the points.
All right, so don't sneeze at Hawaii and Northern Iowa. Midnight. What was that app trip? Do you remember the app from the beginning of the year? Spectrum, I know was it locally, but then it was like Team Sports app or something.
Team Sports sounds right.
Yeah, I think that's it. All right, Phil, give us your favorite plays for week 4. I've got a couple, but I'll let you go first.
I'm going to go with Georgia Tech. I talked about ranked teams. Cincinnati delivered for me last week. I'm going to take the Bearcats at home. And then I'm going to go with Louisiana. I think they're in a great situation this week against Tulane, a team coming off its 2 biggest games of the month. This is Louisiana's biggest game of the month.
Yeah, Tulane have been punching up in weight. Now they're getting Louisiana. I would actually lead the other side because, maybe somebody they could pick on a little bit. But Georgia Tech, Cincy, Louisiana for Phil. Tripp, anything you want to provide for the group?
I like the under in that Kansas-West Virginia game. It's 56. And I never do this because, we're trying to find like real plays, real value. I'm going to try to just buy a win for Florida State. I'll take Cal plus the points. Florida State just needs it bad. I mean, the fan base, we've got to have it. And I'll go, and I know Phil likes Oklahoma here. I like Tennessee. I just, through whatever we've seen 3 weeks, I just think they look really good. And I think Nico's just been phenomenal. So I'm going to go with the Vols. Maybe not, maybe not the most popular pick here, but I like Tennessee on the road.
Kyle?
Okay. Phil, I know what you say about betting on streaks. You can only lose one. So the Brett Key thing makes all the sense in the world to me. But I'm gonna stay away. I'm going NIU minus 14. I feel good about 2 touchdowns over Buffalo. Arizona State, Texas Tech over that 59.5. And then the Iron Skillet, 103rd installment. SMU is an underdog against TCU for the 24th straight time. It didn't appear that they would be the underdog coming into this one 3 weeks ago, but they are coming off an open week, coming off a loss to SMU. I think they get right, catching 3 at home. Give me SMU as the dog, NIU 2-touchdown favorite, ASU Texas Tech over 59.5. He's at Phil Steele 042. I'm at Kyle Schass at Locks of the Doc. Follow us all on Twitter, on X, the Varsity Network channel on YouTube, College Sports Now, wherever you podcast. If you want, go back one more episode. You can catch Phil with Wayne Cook and Stephen Hartzell and their normal hit Tuesday into Wednesday on College Sports Now. We'll be back for week 5. Phil, it's been great. Phil Steele Plus YouTube tour is available, correct?
That's right. It's up and available right now. Just go to philsteele.com and take the tour. You get 5 free selections, 3 quick hitters, and 2 NFL plays this week. And guys, thanks. You did great research once again. Always fun doing the show with you.
Appreciate it as always. We'll see you next week here on the Phil Steele Show.